Hello, everybody. So I've been playing some Helldivers 2, and they released their patch notes today. I wanted to talk about the patch notes and just my current thoughts about the patch and general advice, anyways, after some of the stuff I've read. So let's get started. So first thing we do have is planetary hazards. So they are adding more hazards to the game. So this can be fire, tornadoes, meteor showers. They say they add the extra layer of excitement and predictability as they navigate the hellscape. It's kind of true. The downside, though, is that there's not really any way to like fully control or like play around the hazards, right? So if you're getting like a meteor shower, sometimes you'll just get killed by the shower, and it's currently not clear like what you're supposed to do to avoid those scenarios. Like maybe you see the shower, you just run the hell away, or you can find like maybe a rock or a place to like dive or jump down and not get hit. But currently, based on what my teammates are doing, right, you just kind of, some people just kind of die for free, and that's not super fun if there isn't like super counterplay. So maybe as time grows, people will know, oh, it looks like there's a meteor shower, let's all run in the opposite direction to not die, but that's currently the case. Another cool thing is that it does seem like they have buffed the environmental damage for fire, probably gas as well, but definitely for fire. Fire used to do nothing, honestly. It felt, I think there was a bug where fire damage did not apply after the initial hits. So if you were just like throwing fire on the ground, it actually wouldn't damage the bugs. It seems like that is fixed. So that is ending up being a buff to all fire weapons, since now you can actually deal damage to bugs and bots based on fire on the ground, things like that. So that combined with some of the other fire weapon buffs has made some weapons a lot better, but we'll get into it when we get there. But yeah, definitely cool to see that they're dealing with some of the other issues. Even though they didn't mention it in here, it is something to keep in mind. Eradicate missions are now harder. So it was too easy. People were using eradicate missions to farm. Basically, you would just do eradicate missions nonstop, get tons of medals. Not really samples, but a lot of medals. So it seemed it was like by far the best way of getting tons of medals. It seems like they want to turn that down a little bit, so now it requires more kills and enemies spawn more frequently. So, and it's going to take twice as long. So they basically want to lower that farm method, cut it in half, which is pretty significant. So maybe it'll just be good to just play the normal like 40-minute missions, but I still think this will probably be the best way to gain tons of medals, but it probably won't be as good as it used to be. Next up, we have like the meat and potatoes. This is really what's getting a lot of people getting comments from the community. Essentially, they nerfed a lot of particular weapons that people were liking. There was at least an expectation for some players, unreasonable in my opinion, but for some players, that they wouldn't nerf some of the popular weapons. A lot of the comments was that the best weapons weren't actually like performing best statistically. We all know that's a lie. They were for sure, but you can kind of see it here. Breaker got nerfed. Breaker is the standard meta weapon for primary. Capacity decreased from 16 to 13. Recall increased from 30 to 55. So recalls are going to hurt a little bit harder. It's going to be harder to control, and you're not going to have as many shots. So you get 7 slots, so you're basically losing 21 shots, which is quite a lot, considering how much you have total. So definitely significant nerf in it and how good it feels, and we'll see. But still has a lot of the benefits. The damage isn't decreasing. It's just like you're going to have to either rely more on using your armor or your ammo correctly, or just having supply packs or anything like that. Railgun also got decreased. Armor penetration, damage against durable enemy parts decreased. So unsafe mode still will deal armor penetration fully, but the safe mode, and that's the mode you start with. You have to like manually change it. That one will bounce off some parts like the charger, armor, things like that. The railgun will actually bounce off in safe mode. So you do have to always have a habit of keeping it unsafe mode. You also need to charge up to 90%. So when you are scoping, you'll see there's a little bar that goes up. If you go to 100, the railgun would explode and kill you. So you have to be a little bit careful, but you want to aim it to 90% if you want to have like significant damage. Now, even with that, it's still going to deal less damage, and a lot of people don't like that. So you were able to like two-shot some like really core enemies. Now it seems like that's going to be a lot lower. So a lot of people are not happy about this change. Mostly due to there aren't other good options against armor penetration. People and the game spams lots of chargers late in the game, so it just feels like it's much harder to deal with like 4 chargers or 3 chargers coming at you with this change if you're using the railgun. But that's just one change. Maybe people will find other weapons to use that feel good. There are other weapons that did get buffed, so let's talk about them. So flamethrower damage per second increased by 50%. This is pretty significant. Combined with the fact that the fire damage actually deals damage, like the fire effect actually deals damage now, you actually can kill chargers pretty quickly with this. In terms of fire or charger kills, this is definitely one of the better options nowadays. I will say that it's still not that good against Battle Titans, so you're not going to have like, oh, this kills everything, but it does kill most enemies, and if you just run away from the Battle Titans, you might just be fine. So Flamethrower does seem significantly better and definitely usable now that the fire, the floor damage actually damages as well. Laser Cannon is improving its enemy parts, and then the armor penetration and the feel of the gun and like the recoil it also improved. So this also works pretty well now. You can actually kill chargers pretty fast as long as you're targeting the same enemy part. Your laser cannons, they have good ammo, like they don't use ammo, so you can just kind of make sure you're using them properly. So laser cannon feels good. This one does require a little bit more like skill testing. I feel like you have to target the same part, so it's not as clear or easy to do. But if you do get good with it, this is definitely another option people might gravitate towards if they like that type of playstyle. And not having not having ammo is just really nice. I just like that as well. Punisher total ammo capacity equaled increased from 40 to 60. Stagger force increased, and damage per bullet increased from 40 to 45. So this helps for sure. Having armor capacity increasing just makes it feel really good. Another thing that's not mentioned, but I'll mention it here, is that the Slugger also got the same treatment where the ammo capacity increased from 40 to 60. Another nice thing is that when you take the ammo from supplies, it fully takes all supplies. It used to be only 20, now it fully increases. So these are pretty big buffs for both of these weapons, the Punisher and the Slugger. Definitely think the Slugger is a better boost from these changes, but they both work, and definitely it'll be interesting to see how people test this out and see if it feels a lot better comparative to Breaker and some of the other weapons. And the Spray and Pray also had armor penetration increase, fire increase, and the number of pellets increased, but they reduced the magazine size. So they did some buffs, but then they nerfed the magazine size quite a bit. I haven't tested this weapon out myself. It was really bad, the worst in one of the weaker weapons in the game, but maybe this does help make it feel good. So we'll have to see. But I haven't tested this one out myself, so I don't really know. But yeah, definitely cool to see. Overall, like, a lot of people are not super duper happy with it, but I think they're just trying to find a balance where people will be using a large amount of weapons, and currently people are just using Breaker and Railgun. I'm a big arc Thor believer. I've just been using that primarily. It didn't get changed here, it seems, so I'm probably gonna stick to the arc Thor. I really like its usability to clear out small enemies and not really deal too much with even chargers are pretty good. You can kill them. The only issue is, like, I really didn't have that much success against the Battle Titans. A lot of people are like, oh, you can shot them if you're lucky or if you have latency spikes. especially if you're not like the host. You can maybe kill them really fast, but I really haven't found that consistency, so I just didn't really focus too much on bot hunters unless that was like the only enemy we were really focusing on it as a group. So I'm still big fan of Arc Thor. It didn't get changed, so I do think Flamethrower seems cool, and probably people will test and figure out like the new like what's really good to play anyways. So yeah. Next up we have the stratagems. So the energy shield backpack also got nerfed, so there's a delay before recharging. So it used to just recharge pretty quickly. Even if you got hit, you could just kind of move away for like a 1 second, 2 seconds, and it's back on. Now it seems to be a lot lower. We're going to talk about the other their other messages, but it does seem to make it a little bit worse. It's still probably just really good still, just because having more health just seems really good. It was really this supply or the rovers that people were really or a backpack for like auto cannon. Those are really what people I saw were using. So I don't really think that's going to change too much. If you are using supplies, you're probably still going to do that. If you're using auto cannon backpacks or things like, you're still probably going to use that. And if you're a rover fan, like you're still going to use that. So I just feel like maybe there might be less energy shield backpacks, but I still think it does its job well enough that probably not going to change too much. And then the 380 MN and 120 mm orbital barrages, this was a pretty good buff. The bombardment increase and the spread decrease. So before, these two were just too wide mostly and too random. Like you could throw this and it would kill you, just because it would hit you even if you were trying to run away. If you're unlucky, like a lot of times you weren't that unlucky, so you'd get away. But like you had a chance even if you were running away for it to still kill you. But here it seems it's a lot easier to not have that happen, and it's longer, and you now have like pretty good targeting. Well, not targeting, but like a pretty good spread where it's not going to just shoot in Timbuktu even if you're trying to hit like, you know, a house or something. So seems a lot nicer. 120 seems really good into clearing like those like small bug breaches, and the 380 you can throw it in if you're trying to like deal with like the bot areas and things like that. It does its job, I think, a lot better. So I'm happy with those stratagem changes there. And then we have some bug fixes. I do think there were some bug fixes increasing the armor rating. We'll talk about that later, but also some I guess bugs also being included that feel pretty bad. So yeah, you could kind of take a look at this. Some of the main ones is the armor fixing. The flashlight effectiveness, I think, is also pretty good. And generally, you now have like the fixed fire gas hazard damage. I think that's also very important to discuss. So next thing we'll talk about is they had like people were generally negative about the patch, but they wanted to write a post to kind of like explain their reasoning, you know, that kind of thing. So primary weapons, we want to speak about the general power. Many have commented they aren't powerful enough to deal with all the enemies, and that's intentional, right? So you need to rely on your stratagems to deal with them. It doesn't mean that the primary should feel good, but it's primary only since it's something you spawn with. They've seen many who say don't nerf, only buff. However, the designer, they'll tell you it's not a great idea, but I understand where the sentiment comes from. I mean, I kind of see where they're coming from, but I also, you know, like I've designed some stuff as well. I do think the most important thing is to make your player base happy, right? Like now the player base can be wrong in what makes them happy, right? And it's your job to figure out where they're wrong, right? And if they've tested and they feel like, oh, making sure there's a wide amount of options is good, is nice. And maybe the issue in terms of like is not like they buffed or they nerfed too hard, is that they didn't buff first before they nerfed. Like if a lot of the weapons feel not good, maybe they should first bring those up and then see if people use those, and if that's still not an issue, then lower down. But it seems like they're doing a little bit of both, but they're targeting the most like popular things first, and maybe that's where people aren't happy. I think if they first just had buffing all the weaker things and then seeing if people switch and then nerfing if people don't switch, I think that would have been like it's the same result, but I feel like that would probably have went over better. Just to see like after the buffs, do people actually change or people still just using the meta stuff just because they're used to it? But regardless, it's interesting their thoughts. Like it's always good, I think, for them to talk about their philosophy just so that you kind of get a feel of why they do things. But yeah. I believe players are scared of nerfs because the rules of fantasy rap and reruns are fun. It's actually important. The issue is that the players don't think there are good options, right? But I disagree. I think there are good options. It's just like, the general player base is like one dimensional in a sense. So you could say like maybe they're right. Like they nerfing the best weapons or the most common weapons makes people branch out, and maybe that's like the way they do it. It's just interesting because that does have an immediate negative kickback. All right, let's take a look at some of the changes. So the breaker was pinned down as a meta weapon, vastly overperforming other weapons and being the best choice if YouTube was to believe. I mean, it's that's not really fair. This is so like mean. You know what I mean? Like it's like, oh, the people from YouTube don't know what they're talking about. Not that I've made any videos. Like it's not me they're talking about, but it's interesting that they'll say like that. It's not because you like they're saying like, oh, the players can't think for themselves. Like the players tested all the weapons and it felt the best. Like I agree with that. Like I tested most of the weapons and it's just like there are situations that the breaker saves you from that other weapons don't. Like even if you want even if you wanted to use the other weapons, if like every time a stalker comes only the breaker can actually save you from dying, well then you're going to use the breaker because it's the other weapon that will save you from dying. And even if the other weapons are like cooler or have like interesting use cases, if every time you die to a stalker, like you're not going to switch off because the breaker's the only thing that saves you. So that's kind of the issue there. It's not that there aren't other good weapons. It's like so there are some scenarios where you'll just die if you don't have like good answers, and the breaker had the most answers, where some of the other weapons, even though they might have been better in some other scenarios, there were just areas you come up where you just die because you can't do anything, where the breaker would have actually given you a chance to live. So that's my thought process on why people were gravitating towards the breaker. But I do think players think and they try the weapons, and if it doesn't feel good, they're not going to keep using it. Like regardless, like you can have a broken weapon, but it doesn't feel good, people aren't going to use it. When we look at the breaker in the data, it painted a picture of a well-liked weapon that was great at killing the smaller enemies and generally had a few more kills. It was, however, not necessarily better at making you succeed in the mission, and no real damage nerfs were warranted, though the total damage was quite high compared to other weapons. Sure. I mean, they're saying that this... Like, it's weird because they're saying that, oh, breaker didn't need a nerf. Like... But we nerfed it anyways because you guys liked it or something. I don't know. This one's definitely a weird thing to say, I guess, in that it's the most popular and you're like, oh. I'm actually of the belief that if something is super popular, that in itself is warranted a nerf. But that's not the argument they use, you know what I mean? So that's why it's like kind of weird. Because I would actually justify that argument, though. It goes both ways, right? Things that are not popular need a buff. So, I feel like you should do both. If you're going to do something like that, you should definitely do both. And then there were some of that, but it wasn't like high enough for people to not complain. To that end, we lowered the amount of shells in magazine, increased the reshell to kind of fit that fantasy of being a shotgun that bucks wildly but hoses down targets in front of you. So for sure, Punisher, powerful pump shotgun that hits hard but limited by slow fire rate, and it has to be constantly topped off. Sure, it has a bug with half ammo being picked up, so this is a bug that they fixed apparently. So that's something that was going to happen regardless. But to keep it more in line with 10 Fantasy, they increased the damage per shotgun and the stagger and total amount of ammunition you can carry. So hopefully it feels more punchy. It does. So I do think this helps. And it's the same thing with the slugger, even though it's not mentioned here. They also did this kind of similar thing. So definitely good for both of those two weapons. And I do think there might be people just using this now because of the changes. And then the spray and pray, they increase the penetration, fire rate, shotgun pellets. I haven't tested this, but it's definitely cool that they did this. It's interesting because they nerfed it. This was definitely one of the least popular weapons, and they nerfed something in it. It's just weird to me, but maybe the buffs were enough to counteract the nerf. And then the railgun, it was vastly overperforming in how safe it was to use and how convenient it was, not requiring a backpack or assistant to be effective and not requiring risk to take out even large armor targets. So they've changed the safe mode. It's capable of penetrating heavy armor, but not heavily armored like Charger Ball Titans. So safe mode doesn't work against Charger Ball Titans, which is the most the reason you were using it. You weren't really using it to kill some of the weaker. You had your breaker for that. For those targets, you have to run an unsafe mode. Most people were doing that. In addition, we reined in the railgun's ability to damage massive body parts, so you have to score hits on head and other weak points. So it's now harder to use as well. It's not that you can just like shoot anywhere and it still kills things. You have to kind of aim for the weak points. So definitely a big nerf. We're aware it rose to prominence as part of other anti-tank weapons not being convenient or efficient in comparison. Yeah, so this is what I was talking about. Like it would have been nicer if you buffed these first. Like just buff these first and see if people are still just a railgun believer. And if that is the case, then tone it back. But they decided not to even buff the other anti-tanks, and I think that's where people get like disappointed, because it's like, okay, when are you going to be buffing these? Flamethrower, generally they increase the direct damages as well as the fire ground damage now works, so it's just a big buff. Please enjoy. But yeah, once again, other Helldivers can just be cooked as well, so you just have to be careful. But still, it still has like downsides because it has a short range and large volatility, right? You can burn yourself if you're not careful, things like that. So yeah, still feels good, and you can do a lot of things. And a laser cannon, they said they had a roll of machine gun with infinite ammo, but they were disappointed, expecting armor penetration, right? So now they've changed it to have additional damage versus body parts and armor penetration. So it's a different weapon from what they thought they were making initially. So they're going to see how strong it is and if it gets changed again if it doesn't work out too well. So and then the backpack, they just increased the time that shield needs to start regenerating, if not broken quite significantly. So if it wasn't broken, it would just go back to full essentially. Now you have to, even if it takes damage, you have to wait before it goes back to full. So unlucky. And then when it breaks, it'll take longer to regenerate. So it's just a lot riskier. It just doesn't like solve. It doesn't like hard carry you like super hard. Now it might be a little bit weaker, but I still think people that like shield backpack will probably still like shield backpack. It just gives you like more life. So yeah. And then the barrages we talked about, they're a lot better, much closer, less area of denial. So yeah. In closing, this is just their thoughts. I'm not sure I fully agree with all of their statements, but I do like that they talk about it generally. I think that's just a good, healthy thing for game devs to do. So overall, that's that. And then there's a couple things as well, just some stuff. So I want to talk about the armor. So armor used to take 6 hits per kill. So pretty much all armor had 100 armor, or before, like even the low, like theoretically low armors had 100 armor in essence, and the high armors had less. They all had 100. Now they've nerfed that, so the smaller armors or the lower armor they're less strong as they used to be, and then the heavier armors are slightly stronger. So here's 2 tests from 2 different people on Reddit, US Healthcare and Virtosan. So the first one was just general hits. They took 3 hits to die with light armor. So if you are using, a lot of people were using light armor before because it wasn't getting nerfed. It just had 100 armor practically. So now you're gonna die a lot faster, maybe twice as fast. So you gotta be real careful with light armor, and then heavy armor. For their sample, they died quite quickly. 2 hits to 4 hits to 6 hits, where the medium armor with heavy padding took 7 hits. So definitely interesting because they should have very similar amounts of armor, but the medium armor extra padding took less or took more hits to die, and they don't have heavy armor with extra padding. The second person did, where they took 4 hits with 50 armor compared to 5, and then 9 hits with heavy armor with extra padding, which is decent in my opinion. And while the 150 and the 100 were like very similar, so and that was using their weakest bug enemies. I will say that against bots, the heavy armor does seem quite good. Where it blocks the lasers a lot better, or the gunshots a lot better. So maybe heavy armor is better for bots, less effective for bugs. But this was the test that I saw, where people were testing with bugs just because, I don't know, they like bugs or whatever. Bugs seem more popular to me, but could be wrong about that. And then just some other extra things I want to talk about. You can reply spear shots from armor packs on the ground instead of not only supply backpacks. I said beacons, but yeah, but supply backpacks. So this does help spear shots. Spear shots might be something people use if you could just refill it with the armor packs on the ground. So that is something interesting. Might be another tool people use for the ball titans and the chargers if you can just resupply a lot easier. And then for PS5, it seems to be crashing constantly. So if you're having crashing issues, that's just a PS5 bug. It also could be for PC, but I haven't heard as much PC issues. And then the slugger, we talked about already, but the slugger also has 60 armor, fully recharges for resupply. So that's the patch. This is definitely a lot longer than I intended, but I just wanted to talk about the changes here. Let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care of yourselves and have a wonderful rest of your day.